ahead and start. So I want to go ahead and jump right into it. I know we have some announcements, but we're going to do things a little bit different this time. We're going to wait till after the presentation to get to the announcements because like I said, we're running a little bit behind. I apologize to everybody every time we go through this, and we're a little bit challenged, but hey, we're here, right? I'm actually excited for everybody that's actually here in person. I'm a little bit shocked at how many people showed up because of how cold it is. So thank you for coming. And for those of you online, thank you for taking the time from your busy schedule and joining us. I think you'll definitely enjoy this presentation. I've known Paul for, we're going to say a long time, almost 30 years. So one of the things that impressed me about Paul is just how forward thinking he was and his ability to be able to influence people no matter in what department we were in. I know he had a lot of influence of the way I thought about things and I should think about things. It made me think about design at a very early age. So I won't take any more of his thunder with that. Paul, thank you for coming. And here's Paul Westbrook.
Thank you very much. And when Jose called, I thought, I'm a mechanical engineer. I was in facilities my whole career at Texas Instruments. You guys must have run out of safety speakers, apparently. So he asked me if I would present. He said, on what? I said, on what? He said, whatever you want. And so I began to think, what is it that we might share in common as a safety professional or industrial hygiene or whatever your background is, and mine is facilities. And it got me thinking about we all see things that need improvement. We all have to figure out how to influence people to make positive change. And so I thought I would talk about that a little bit and show a few examples of things that I've done that may have made a difference. All right, let's see. So most of you observe something could be done in a better way, right? Safer, more ergonomic, less polluting. I mean, we all see things all the time that we think that could probably be better. But where does change come from whether it's a corporation or a small company or, around your house? Well, it's executives and management drive most of it, no surprise, right? They drive changes. But the question is, are those always the best changes? And is it adopted because it's a good change or because people are told they have to? And does it change the culture of the company? That's always the question. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. The people who are closest to the work, people who are closest to activity, usually are the ones who have the best understanding of things. And they generally have some leeway to make some incremental improvements, but their voices aren't always heard or understood. So when change is allowed, the other thing is it's often very incremental. We rarely do breakthrough change because it's so difficult. Especially the larger the corporation gets, the more inertia there is to make change. Mm-hmm. And so, but sometimes it's just, incremental going on. Sometimes we need rapid and radical. So how can you affect either one of those scenarios is the question. So I think back to, I don't know if there's anybody worked with Intel or from Intel. The good thing about being in facilities, we actually shared a lot of information with other semiconductor companies. It wasn't, trade secrets. We all used fans and pumps and buildings and things. So we had a Semitech down in Austin. We used to have a lot of sharing. So I had a lot of friends who worked at Intel, and when we were talking about change, they had a mantra at their company, copy exact. And we all know why they did it. You took a process that worked and you copied that exactly to a new facility, and they were copying the facilities. Well, guess what? Copy exact forbids continuous improvement, right? If you absolutely copy everything exactly, you're never going to make any change. And so it was kind of a running joke about, copy exact and how frustrating that was for their engineers. So, hope is a stance, not an assessment, and you can't depress people into action. So one of my mentors over the years, Amory Lovins of the Rocky Mountain Institute in Colorado, I'll just let you read the quote there, but every time I'd get to feeling down, I'd go read one of Amory's quotes, and he often talked about, it's easy to get depressed with what's going on in the world or what's going on here and there, but does that make you any more effective at making a positive change? No, it doesn't. So, his quote talks about, don't be somebody should, be an I do person, and go out and implement change. So when you're implementing change, or you want to implement change, first step is a good idea, right? So you have to have an idea of how something could be done better. And just interestingly enough, there's a couple of quotes from the old Polaroid camera inventor, Edwin Land. And people who have a new idea just stopped having an old one. And invention is a sudden cessation of stupidity. So, that a lot of times it's a bit of work to get to a new idea before you can even start thinking about change. And just, you've probably all seen the 9 dots problem. If you haven't, connect these with 4 lines without lifting your pencil. So you can draw mentally and, 2, 3, 4, can't get the last 2. You could sit there and draw. You're never going to get all 4 of them, all 9 of the dots with 4 lines in conventional thinking. So why did you bound the dots? 1, 2, 3, 4. Just went a little outside of the boundaries that we all have put on us and we put on ourselves a lot of times. The other way, you could do it with 3. If the dots aren't infinitesimally small and you have as wide a space as you need, you can just draw 3 zigzag a Z or a backwards Z and get all the dots. And if you're a geographer solution, you just go around the world with 1 long line until you connect them. If you're kind of destructive, you just cut the dots out and stab a pencil through, and 1 line connects them all. Or nobody said how wide the line could or couldn't be. 1 big broad line, you've got them all 9 connected. So, the part of being innovative and creative before you even get to drive change is to really think about things in a little different way sometimes. Think broadly about possibilities and solutions for whatever the problem is that you see that you're wanting to change. So I showed you that Edward Land, the Polaroid camera. There's a company called Kodak that older people may have purchased film from and gotten developed. But this is a cost of not changing for a corporation. The first digital prototype camera was 1975 by an engineer at Kodak. They made their profits selling film, a lot of film. They did do some investments in digital. I think they saw it coming, but they really made some bad choices along the way. And I think they were clinging to the old business model just a little too long. And they went bankrupt in 2012. Kodak still exists. It came out of bankruptcy, but it's a shell of what it used to be. They didn't change. They didn't think forward. So, good design is kind of the foundation of everything. Being in facilities, I did a lot of retrofit projects over the years, but I also got the chance to do some designs from the start. And there is nothing like getting the right team together and really doing integrative design from the start. But let's talk about design a little bit. Here's a few quotes. I'll just let you read them real quick. Probably my favorite is, everything is designed, few things are designed well. Here's a bad design. And as safety professionals, you'll appreciate whatever this photo is. I think it's a fire escape. No handrails. There's power lines, if you can see it on the photo, weaving through there. So if you were evacuating, you go across there and duck and swing your way out, I guess. That's a real good example of a bad design, right? Now, the thing about design, it's not, people think I'm going to compromise, get what I want. But, if you think about the way nature has evolved many designs over the years, a pelican isn't a compromise between a seagull and a crow. It's the best possible pelican that's evolved over 90+ million years, and it's pretty good. Amory used to always say the need for compromise is probably a symptom of misstated design intent. You didn't really define it very well. What were you trying to do? So when I think about design, and I think we all fall into the trap of technology quite often, but there's two techs in design. There's technology, and that's machinery and equipment, and so forth, but technique or process, it's the way of carrying out a task. I know when we're looking at safety at TI, there's putting controls on systems to try to do things, but really people's behavior is and remains to be the number one challenge of any kind of safety activity. So the processes and how you design for the process is really the big one. This is a great quote from one of my favorite jazz musicians, Charles Mingus. Making the simple complicated is commonplace. Making the complicated simple, awesomely simple, that's creativity. So it applies everywhere. Now, I give a lot of presentations on sustainability and energy efficient design and renewable energy systems and so forth. As I was putting together my slides, I'll tell you about this first, and you'll probably notice something that's missing on my little circle over here. But let me talk about the process of integrative design first. So the way most things have evolved to be designed, take a building, for instance. UTD wants to build a new building over there, let's say. The architect draws up some beautiful design. Often, no thought about the orientation of the building. Is there enough room for the ductwork to fit in above the ceiling? Those things, often in the way of the beautiful design, get left behind to solve later. We always called it throw it over the wall. He'd throw that over the wall. The engineers have to figure out how to make it work. They throw it over the wall. They figured out how to build it. It's a lot of fixing things. And it doesn't have to be that way, because the integrative design process is when you get everybody working together. And I'll show you on the next slide kind of the iterative. And I realize when I put this up, I'm often talking to engineers and architects and stuff. And you get the site selection, the shell, and the window quality, and the natural light, and plumbing, and electrical. And I forgot one that we always did integrate, which was the ESH teams, right? You get thought about exits and corridors and safety and all those things. So I'm going to add this to my slide going forward, because value engineering is neither. When projects get going and they get over budget, there's the dreaded value engineering stage where things get cut. And they get cut without ever thinking about how they connected to everything else. If you do integrative design, then you eliminate the need for value engineering, because you're cost estimating as you go, and there's no surprise at the end. And this is one where I left out ESH as well and added it. But the way this generally works is you kind of get a concept plan, and you get as many people together as you can, and you work through all the issues, and you hear all the voices. And then you go back to your respective offices and think about, something you heard, and maybe further develop that thought process or design. Then you come back together and tighten it up a little bit. And you go away again. You think about things and do a little more research, and you come back. And by the time you get the construction documents out, the thing is ready to go. Everybody's input has been heard. The cost estimating has been going on. The construction contractors are involved. The build process, which is where most of the cost is and where most of the change orders that are costly, goes super smooth, because you took a little extra time and a little extra cost to do the design part the right way, which is the least expensive portion of any project and the quicker portion of any project. So just a couple of quotes, you're on the right track when your solution for one problem accidentally solves several others. And when I've participated in a couple of those projects that have done that, and this is so true, it's not even funny how often this occurs when you really get the right teams together. So you have a great idea, you've got a good design, or you have a plan for design. How do you influence people? That's the real trick of all of this. Couple of ways, if you're in the early stages of thinking about something, find some like-minded colleagues. That's always good to get some friendly fire back and forth on ideas. Then get feedback from skeptics, right? Because there may be a flaw in your thinking or a piece you just aren't aware of. So it's good to think about that. And then find your synergies, where you accidentally solve several things with one. And then the golden ticket is finding a management champion to help get your voice heard and help propel this idea forward. A few techniques: engage and ask, right? Ask questions, ask, and listen. Connect with coworkers. I think this is the most important: establishing credibility, not necessarily authority. Sometimes we want to have the authority to go and fix something. Takes a little bit longer, but if you establish yourself as a credible person, a credible expert, a credible and knowledgeable person, then you work on the influence, then it probably results in much better and holistic and longer lasting type changes. And then you got to activate hope, right? I mean, you need some emotional engagement sometimes on these things. And a great quote from Greta at the bottom there. The one thing we need more than hope is action. And once we start to act, hope is everywhere. So we're just trying to influence people and aim for a common goal. And often that means you have to appeal to their best interests, not just your own. That's really the trick. So I'm going to share a few stories now. Over the years, I was thinking about, when have I actually influenced something that was certainly not in my authoritarian control of my whatever project or management role I was in. So this is one I didn't influence, but it had a profound impact on me. Back in the 80s, I started at TI in January of 1983, and we had a decent safety record, but I remember seeing some management slides that the trend was going in a bad direction. And one day management, I wish I knew, I don't know where the idea, I don't know who got the idea of the DuPont safety stop system. I don't know if it was a employee who brought it to management or a manager attending a conference. I really don't know the origin, but our management bought in heavily to the safety training observation program. Cards, and it was behavioral, it was technique. When you would see somebody standing on the top rung of a ladder, we went to the classes and we learned, you'd first say, hey, can you come down here and talk to me for a minute? Get them out of the dangerous position without yelling or anything like that. And then ask them, do you understand about ladder safety? I'm concerned you might fall. I'm concerned about you, not I'm scolding you, but, try to have discussions with people so that their behavior begins to change. Yelling at people might be effective, but it's not probably going to change them long term. And, how did this go? Well, first it was skepticism. Oh, great, another management program, right? But they kept going with ongoing support. And then when you start seeing positive results from it, hey, even we did it in facilities, and other organizations started asking us about it and adopting the STOP program. Well, and it does change the culture over time. And the statistics got so much better. And I will tell you personally, I remember it affected my own behavior. I mean, when I was home working on something on the ladder, I probably would have, I got to reach that thing. Nope. I would get down and I would move the ladder over and I'd go up, because I had been through that enough that I realized it wasn't worth me taking a trip to the hospital for that couple of minutes it would take me to move the ladder. Why was I stupid before? That changed my own culture of behavior, and it did it at work too. So let me tell you, I'm going to get to the biggest project at TI that was probably the biggest success that we had. But it has an origin story, kind of like all the Marvel comics. We're going back a few movies. This is the Westbrook house. This is my house. So back in 1993, I lived in a little tract house in Garland. Started at TI, and a few years later, I bought a little tract house. And that gave me the opportunity to find out everything that was poorly designed in a tract house. And I made notes. And I kept thinking about, how could you do a house better? How could it be more energy efficient? How could it be more resource efficient? How could it just be better without adding cost? And so I bought some land in 1993 in a little town of Fairview, right between Allen and McKinney off 75, a couple acres of land, and set out designing a house. And I had, some ideas, but I also found builders or people in the trades and would ask them questions and listen and learn. And I'd walk around my own house with a tape measure. You know, what's the right width for a hallway? How high should a light switch be? I was always thinking about all the things, and I was trying to integrate them together. I wanted to design a better building. So I had to have a design guide. So I wanted energy efficiency because I'm frugal, low maintenance because I'm lazy, low environmental impact at the time. Sustainability didn't exist as a word, I don't think, in the early 90s. And, but I kept thinking about, you know, how do I reduce the need for utilities and use waste products and recycle and reuse? And because I was paying for it, I was very interested in affordable and cost effective. And I just optimized the design really over almost a couple of years. And this is kind of the integrative design process. So I started thinking about orientation with respect to the sun's path and the best glazing, windows in the right place with the right overhang. So we didn't have all that summer sun coming in, but we got low winter sun to heat us up. Insulation, air tightness, reflective roof here in Texas, right? All that heat hits on your roof. And what do? We put black roofs on everything. We're really a sharp culture. So you iterate these things, you know, the layout, how do the rooms relate to each other? You get the size down, you keep it compact. What kind of air conditioning? You know, I have done whole hour presentations just on the house, but some of these things, you know, shrunk how much heating and cooling I needed. So I had about a half the size air conditioning that a typical house would have. So I can invest a little more money in a more efficient one. So I lowered the amount of energy by half that I needed to heat and cool, and then I doubled the efficiency of the unit. So it only cost me about a quarter of all my neighbors to have the same comfort level. And I've been in the house for 28 years, and so that's quite a bit of savings over time. So I have better comfort actually at lower energy use and cost. Now, with every one of these stories, there's a point where you hit some really big roadblocks. And the one that almost killed this, and you know how it is, I think human nature is over time, we block out the bad things. When you've done something, you think about, oh, good, these were the good things, but you try to repress the bad memory. And I had a reporter ask me once, he was interviewing, they were doing a TV show about the house, and he stopped for a minute. He said, look, all your stories, I love the energy, I love the enthusiasm, but surely there was a difficult point. People need to hear that it's not all puppy dogs and kittens and roses. They have to work through difficulties. And until he asked me that, I realized I had completely blocked this portion out of my thinking. It was trying to find a builder, because I could do all the design, but I was working full time. I could design at nights and weekends. That's easy to do. But I needed somebody on the site managing the project while I was, 15 miles down the road at work at TI. And I kept interviewing builders, and I was getting disgusted and disappointed. And I couldn't find one. And I finally found a guy who talked a good story, and I signed the contract with him. And man, as soon as he got the contract signed, he just went south like the rest. So I fired him and kept looking. And I was reading an article in Solar Today magazine back in 1994, I think it was. And there was an article about a couple that builds energy efficient homes for low income families, because who needs a low energy bill more than a low income family? And I thought, oh, this is a great story. And I read, and they're doing a few of the things that I was looking to do, structural insulated panels and things. And so I get to the end of the article. This is a national magazine. It says, BBH Enterprises is a Carrollton, Texas based company. So I go to 1994, the yellow pages, find BBH, picked up the phone, called. It was a husband and wife team. Richard Harwood he answered the phone, and I said, first of all, I saw the article, great article in Solar Today. I'm looking to build a custom house. Do you do houses? He said, well, I used to in Chicago, but we've been focusing on these projects. What are you looking to do? So I told him, I said, well, I'm looking at structural insulated panels and passive solar and energy efficiency and geothermal heat pump. And he said, that's a lot of what we're looking to do too. Would you mind bringing your plans over to the house? So my wife and I went over and we spread the plans on the dining room table, and I started talking, and I don't think a couple minutes had gone by, and Richard said, stop, please let me build this house for you. This is exactly the kind of stuff. I know some of this already. I want to learn some of this stuff. Let's work together. And I just that was the moment I overcame the biggest obstacle. So we built it. We moved in 96. We won a national award from the National Association of Home Builders for innovative design. A few of the features. I've got a website, interjazz.com/house. If you want to go, I've got every utility bill and everything up there, but it's a 2-story compact house. Put solar water heating in from the start, and ground source heat pump, structurally insulated panels. House performs very, very well. My first big influence opportunity after that was I didn't put solar electric panels on because they were still quite expensive. It was a very efficient home, so I knew I wouldn't need many, but I waited for the prices to keep coming down. And I actually first installed a wind turbine. I was a beta tester for a company that was doing residential wind turbines. So, but I needed what's called an interconnect agreement with my local utility, which is Grayson Collin Co-op. So I called up one day and I said, yes, I'd like to talk to someone about an interconnect agreement. And the lady who answered the phone up there in Van Alstyne said, what? And I said, interconnect. Oh, we don't do that. And I said, well, could I talk to someone? So I get piped through to the president of the co-op. And he said, we haven't been doing that, but we probably need to think about it. Let me bring it up at the board meeting. So, next month went by, next month, finally got a call back a couple, 3 months later. He said, well, we talked about, we're having our lawyer draft up one. Would you be our beta test and work with us? So it took about 6-7 months, but we finally got an interconnect agreement that allowed me to connect up this wind turbine. And that interconnect agreement then was open for everyone in the Grayson Collin Co-op to do solar, wind, whatever. So I had to influence my whole co-op on why this was a good idea. And I kept in contact with the CEO over the years. And because the net metering, that's the other piece, is when you produce extra, several things can happen. Grayson Collin, if I was producing more than I needed and the meter was spinning backwards, they took that power and then resold it to my neighbor without compensating me for it at all. You can get paid either a wholesale rate or a full retail rate, or they can bank your extra hours so you can use it later. There are a lot of ways to do net metering, but they're the first 14 years were, if you overproduce, we'll take it, thank you, not compensate you, and sell it to your neighbor who you're already feeding back through the transformer. But I kept after it, and it took me 14 years, but we finally got that changed. In 2020, they set up a bank. So if I produce more, say it's October, not using much heat or air conditioning, good sunny month, my meter's been spinning backwards. I produce a few hundred kilowatt hours more than I needed. It goes in a kilowatt hour bank. And then in January, in the low sun month where it's cold and we're running, and I use a little more net from the grid than I sent back, it just comes off my bank at full credit. So I have had 0 energy bills since they implemented this in 2020. I just pay a base fee every month to be connected, but my bank is now up to 1,800 kilowatt hours. I think I bank about, on average, 7 to 8 months of the year. I'm adding to the bank and I'm drawing out 3 or 4 or 5 months of the year. And so it continues to grow. So they also did a free nights and weekends plan, worked beautifully with the solar. But that took me 14 years of persistent, patient, polite discussion, occasionally just kind of keeping it in front of them, and it finally got there. So here's kind of for those of you data people, here is something called KBTU per square foot per year. It's the EUI, energy use of a house. So in 96, the typical Texas house used 41.5 KBTU per square foot per year. My house uses 7. So even without renewable energy, my bills would be way, way, way lower. So it's more than 80% more efficient. And then the yellow box with my renewable system on the roof, it doesn't quite cover all of mine for the year, but that's okay because nights and weekends, if I use energy, I pay 0. So if I added more solar, it wouldn't save me any more money because I'm already paying 0. But in the daytime, when the grid is stressed the most, I'm often producing more than I need and sending back. So Here's a little photograph of my 2 acres of woods and the house nestled in the middle. You can see the solar water heating panels on the left, the 2, and then the solar electric panels. And there's the solar electric panels up on the roof. So how did the house story lead to an influence at TI? We're on the national tour of solar homes almost every year. We've had thousands, literally thousands of people tour the house, including many, many, many fellow TI employees. And even a few managers and executives have come through over the years. So one day in 2002, I was walking down the hall and one of our vice presidents, who had been on my house tour, I think a couple times, stopped me and she said, you know, I was thinking about you the other day. I've been making improvements to my older home in Richardson. I live in Canyon Creek, and it's getting much better, but it's not close to the results that you have. And she said, it made me realize that there's no substitute for doing it right from the start. So my question to you is, next time we build a fab, semiconductor fab, if we think about these kind of things, how much more efficient do you think we could be if we thought about that? And she said, don't even answer right now. She said, find some of your like-minded friends and you guys go do a little research. So got a little skunk works going on with a few friends. We're writing white papers, you know, and I go back to her every couple months and give her an update. We've been doing it for a while, and you know, we're leveling at 25% with no extra cost was easy. I mean, these factories use $20 million of utilities a year. So 25% for a factory that lasts 40, 50 years, savings every year, that gets management's attention, right? So were they interested in solar or were they interested in energy efficient? Not necessarily. They were interested in the money piece, right? So that's the piece that I hooked them with. So Sean and I were talking, and it's interesting, there was a female vice president who was this forward thinking, which I found to be the case more often than not. She said, all right, here's the problem. How are we going to convince, you know, when we get ready to build a new factory, we always announce it and then we tell everybody we need it tomorrow. And we rush in to do, no one wants to take a chance on a different design because you don't want to have a possible failure and be known that you caused a failure. So we're going to copy things that are safe, right? Almost copy exact. And we're going to just do the safe behaviors because we're in a hurry and we're afraid of risk. She said, how do we fix that? So we were sitting there, and I don't even remember exactly what I said. Something about, you know, when people come on my house tour, and she said, that's it, the house tour. So she invited one of our top 5 executives, the senior vice president of worldwide manufacturing, to come out to my house on a Saturday. And she came and he came, and I figured I'd get 30 minutes of his time. And this guy was he was an old New Yorker, and his operating mode, I mean, he was vice president over thousands of people at TI. And his operating mode was the gruff, tough, you know, strong man from New York. He came out to the house in his ball cap and his blue jeans, and he came out as his old engineering self because he was asking detailed questions about low E windows. How do these really work? Like an hour and a half goes by. He's still there just quizzing and looking and asking. He was a smart guy. I mean, he was really starting to I was giving him the integrative design. You know, look, Kevin, I did this, and here's this, and now here's my tiny little ground source heat pump, and it's twice as efficient. And I had my energy bills. I've been in the house, about 7 years, I guess. I had them laid out on the utility room counter, and he looks at him, he goes, that's it? This is all electric, no gas? This is all you're paying every month? And it was pretty small. I mean, even without the solar generation at the time. And he said, all right, I see integrated design in a house. Does this work for a 1 million square foot factory? And I said, yes. The principles work, they're transferable fully. The difference is, like in the Olympics, when you have a dive, if somebody does a cannonball, that's a degree of difficulty of like 1. They're doing 5 backflips and a couple of twists, that's a 9.9. I said, doing my house was a degree of difficulty of a couple, right? I had myself and I had to find a builder and a few contractors. I said, we build a fab, we've got a lot of people we're going to have to influence and get on board. So the degree of difficulty is the hard part, but the principles are fully scalable. And then he said, what do you need from me to make this happen? And Shauna was standing behind him, her jaw unhinged. She was like, oh. And so fortunately, we had done our whole preparation. Luck is when preparation meets opportunity. He just gave me the biggest opportunity of my career. And we had also been we were doing the white papers with my buddies, but I also been meeting with Amory Levins from Rocky Mountain Institute, talking about integrative design. And they do these design charrettes where they bring in about a dozen people and about 40 of us. And we, even before a project's announced, right, you want to get your mentality, you want to think about things a lot differently. So I'd even gotten a price for it. And so Kevin was in my utility room and I said, I need two things from you. I need $90,000. I want to run this 3-day design session with about 30 or 40 of us and a dozen people from this place in Colorado called Rocky Mountain Institute. And he said, you got it. And I said, and I need your verbal and visible support for this, because if I say we're doing something different, there might be 2 people who care. And if you say we're doing something different, everybody's going to say, what is it Kevin wants us to do? And he said, I can do that. And so he left there. Sean and I jumped up and down for a few minutes and said, oh, crap, now we have to make this happen. And, but I tell you what, everything that could go right, I mean, karma took over. Everything that could go right from that point went right. And we organized that 3-day design session. We ended up designing way more efficient than I even estimated we could do. And the night, about 2 months after the charrette, they decided to build the next fab. And it's right down the road on Renner Road in Richardson. That was the factory. It could have been Singapore, could have been New York State. It ended up in Richardson, had the home field advantage. And the night before they announced the design team, my boss called me into his office. He said, hey, are you going to be disappointed if you aren't on the design team for the new factory? And I said, what are you thinking? And he said, well, here's what I'm thinking. If you're on the team, you're going to get caught. You're going to be like in charge of chillers and you're going to get, down in the weeds of the chillers. He said, I want you on the same level as the project manager, and you're going to be our sustainable development manager. And you're going to make sure we keep the integrating going on. You're going to work with all the teams so that we don't lose sight and start going like this. So that changed my role at TI for my last decade plus as the sustainable development manager. There's the picture of our fab. It's got a whole nother wing on it now. It doubled in size a few years ago, but it's just right there at Renner and Alma. And we did a whole bunch of, I could give a whole hour presentation on all the things we did there, but we really did the integrative design part right. It became the first LEED Gold semiconductor factory in the world and is still the most efficient. I told you we exchange information. I toured Intel and TSMC from Taiwan, and we were happy to share all of the efficiency things because we knew it benefited us. And here's how. Manufacturing tools that we buy that go in the fab that every other semiconductor company buys from the same dozen companies, we were trying to drive the efficiency because that's 40 to 50% of the energy use is something we bought from somebody and plugged in. We have no control over that. But if Intel and Samsung and TSMC all say, no, we want variable speed vacuum pumps and we want a control signal that tells them to shut off when there's no wafers in the chamber. We want all these things that can reduce that energy, reduce the waste heat coming out. I mean, it cascades all through. So the power was bringing all of the companies together, facilities people to ask for these things. So we toured everybody, and our fab and TSMC, when I looked a few years ago, our fab and a couple of the factories in Taiwan were about tied for the lowest energy use per chip manufactured. And so it saved over 5 million. I said 25% energy reduction, we got 40%. And here's the beauty. It cost 30% less than the previous factory right down the road 10 miles away in Dallas that we built 10 years earlier. The integrative design process wrung out wasteful costs as well as wasteful energy use. So, everything went well. We didn't spend but a tiny bit of extra money on LEED. on a multi-million-dollar project, it was a very small amount. Here's the efficiency proof. The blue line, this is utilization of the factory and energy per pattern processed. And the best we had in Dallas was the blue line. And then as the Richardson factory came online, it ended up running about 40% more energy efficient in how much energy we used per pattern that was processed in the fab. So after that, we did a LEED Silver edition in the Philippines, first one of those to go in that country. We did a LEED Gold facility in the Philippines after that from the start. And we did a little LEED Gold building in Sugar Land. Then the question came to me next was, all right, we got the new factory thing going. What can we do in all of our existing factories, right? That's still a lot of square footage, 18 million square feet of existing buildings. So that became my next mission, was to figure out what could we do. So we developed common metrics. We put an energy and water champion at each site. Part of the discussion was, should my role expand and I have a bigger team? And I didn't want that. I wanted people who worked at that site every day, who were closest to their site, closest to the work, to just be an energy champion or a water champion. And we would have, like monthly meetings, and sometimes I would make trips there. And they were on the ground. They knew what they could do best at their places. And then we all shared ideas on the meetings, so that when Freising Germany did something innovative and presented it, the guys in Manila said, hey, we could do that too. And so I became a facilitator for all of that. And it kept the people there. And we got some capital to projects would always have to fight with manufacturing capital. But we got dedicated capital for energy and water efficiency projects. All these projects were just good ideas, were waiting to be funded. And we got funding. And they paid back so fast that the funding basically regenerated and funded itself. So here are the last. I retired in 2016. I was able to get data through about 2020 through some friends. And I've cleaned all of the sensitive information and just did relative. So what this chart shows is at TI, we used 2005 as a baseline. So everything is 1.0 back then. So the climbing line is production, how many chips we manufactured. And from 2005 at 1, we're right about 3 in 2020. So production has tripled, 3 times as many chips. Now let's take the red line kind of in the middle. That's the energy use. Energy use has gone up 1%. So the red dashed line, which is energy per chip, is 0.34 of what it was. We more than doubled our global energy efficiency in a decade and a half. Same water, up 26%, but not anywhere close to 3x the chip. And greenhouse gas actually had fallen a little bit by 2020. By 2020, and is still falling. So this was the result. Now, here's a cautionary tale. In 2015, we had done all the efficiency, and I really began pushing for renewables, not on our roofs, but there were these developers who were wanting to put a solar or a wind farm out in West Texas. They needed financing. So the idea was TI would commit to buying the energy output from that farm for 10, 15, 20 years. That developer could go to the bank and say, I have a contract to sell my output to a company, Texas Instruments. They're pretty solid. They could get their funding, they could get their project built. I had a coworker who was on the contract side, and he got all this lined up. He did a great job, went to our CFO, and he was told, I don't believe in climate change. We don't need this wind and solar stuff. The math on that first project would have saved TI $1 million a year. The cost of the wind and the solar was so far below, but he turned it down because he didn't believe in climate change. And I was told I shouldn't talk about it anymore. Well, I was just about 6 months from when I was eligible for my age 55 early retirement. So I thought, you know what? Somebody's got to be bold and keep pushing. So I did. And I suddenly became the lower ranked employee, and I went ahead and retired, which was fine. that CFO retired 2.5 years later, and the guy who took my spot eventually was successful. And by 2020, the greenhouse gas was going down because he was starting to get these large solar and wind farm contracts. And TI is trying by 2030 to have all their Texas power from these renewable sites. So I took a hard dive on that one, but it was okay because it paved the way for eventual success. So this is the senior vice president who came out to my house and spent an hour and a half and toured. When I retired, I got an email from him on my final day, and this is the quote. I love this. It's not often you get a chance to change the way an industry works. With a change like this, it comes down to confidence you have in the person wanting change. Your passion, knowledge, I had credibility in his mind, and determination, I was persistent, that we can improve led to the results we have today. Thanks for what you've done. So on all those words I put back there, this is what influenced him to take a chance on something and support us. So, summary, build your knowledge and credibility, work with other people to build support. You have to be patient, but persistent. And finding the right management champion is really the golden key that finally unlocks the door. It has to happen. Somebody's got to say, you're not going to be scolded. You're not going to fail. We're going to make sure it's successful. Now, today, do you remember my facts and figures? How many kBTU per square foot? Or do you remember the story? Stories engage people, right? That's how we get them to, hope and stories and get them on the side of what we're trying to do. So your path awaits, right? You chose, all these branches were available in life, but here we are today. Look at all those branches that are available from this day forward. It doesn't matter which path you took to today. From today forward, there are lots of paths. There's lots of things that you can go influence and make better for everybody. And I think when I retired, I wrote a book called The Joy of Efficiency. If you want to go buy a book, it has general efficiency, it has all my house story, it has the story of the vice president coming over, and it has all the details about what we did at TI from there going forward. So with that, I'll shut up and answer questions and take it from there. Thank you. Questions, anybody? Oh, go ahead back here. What's that? Well, RFAB 2, RFAB 2, Pablo Ruiz, who worked on the project with me on RFAB 1, was the project manager for RFAB 2. And we'd have lunch every now and then and talk. His goal was to take RFAB 1 and as much as he could do, more improvement. It was already really, really good. So I didn't have direct influence, but all the work we had done led to that. Yeah. Back there.
As we evolve in environmental health and safety, clean or environmental sustainability is more and more important. And this story really relates back to that. And persistence, how many times are we repeating and repeating and repeating again? I think it's all about persistence. So thank you very much. It's a very inspiring story. And in the end, you won.
Yeah. No, you're right. My wife always tells me, I know it's going to happen because you're not going to give up until it does. But I think there's a difference between giving up on a good idea or giving up on a bad idea. I mean, if you've got something that is right, you just can't. You can't stop. I can't stop until it's fixed. And I think that the persistence piece is hard, but that's the one that eventually, think of a river, right? The Grand Canyon, it didn't go worn down in a day. The river is persistent. The river always wins. It doesn't stop.
Yeah, very intelligent related to that.
Yeah, that's Shauna Black. She was, I worked for her off and on over the years. I wasn't working for her when we had the hallway discussion, but we knew each other. And so that that gave us some comfort, right? She knew me, I knew her. In fact, we worked together first in 1984 or 5 or 6. It was early in my career, early in her career. She was pregnant. One of our coworkers wouldn't go on the old elevator with her because he was worried it might break down and she would have the baby with him. And so we had that kind of young project managers, struggling together kind of bond. And she was one who pushed the vice president. She pushed him on a lot of other things too, because she also was persistent about it and brought that perspective. And, it just luck, preparation. I was prepared, but I may have never gotten the opportunity, but I was prepared when it came. That's another big piece. Other questions? Yeah.
So how did you influence your peers and your company for them to tour your home? Because I know you said you had a lot of people touring your home, but what did you do to influence, say, your coworkers?
Well, all those engineers, when they heard my energy bills were that low, they all wanted to come out and see if they could invest. No, that was pretty easy. I would just put out TI would put the Westbrook solar home on the national tour of solar homes. And, we would have literally a few hundred people show up on a Saturday. And my wife and I, we both could do the tours. And, it was about 45 minutes if you really wanted to go through the whole thing. So a neighbor would volunteer and sign people in and queue them up. And then, I would take the group and then my wife would be halfway through. She'd get the next group and we just keep going for like 6, 7 tours each. And then we collapse at the end of the day. So that was actually pretty easy to get the engineers out and to figure out if they could lower their energy bills. Yeah. But how can, well, definitely go to my website and you can get a virtual tour. The national tour is usually the first weekend in October. And we missed a couple of years, but we did it again last year. My wife and I got a camper van almost 4 years ago, and we've been taking 3 and 4 and 5 week trips. And October is a really nice month to go camping. So we missed a couple, but we happen to be there past October. I don't know this next October if we'll be around or not, but go to the interjazz.com/house and you'll find a lot of virtual stuff. But yeah, it's I try to document everything on there because I built my first web page in 1998. And that was self-defense. We were having so many people on the tours asking so many questions. I finally thought, you know what? I'm going to put this here on this website and that'll answer like 95% of the questions. And so I would answer it and I'd say, go here for more information. And it was a self-defense learning HTML back then. I coded the old fashioned way. I don't do that anymore. It's too much work. But I have a web building software. Other question? Is there one more?
I was in Austin when they built that project we're talking about. Austin commercial.
Oh, yeah.
Building. Super popular. I think in the industry it seems like a decrease in the lead, like the platinum and gold levels. Is that driven by cost inefficiency? Because you get like, the platinum level was too high, or
Yeah, it's one of those where, basic lead silver, lead gold. The cost premium isn't too high, but the platinum seems to be where the curve goes up a bit. And the one thing, you just reminded me, we had a really long debate for a few weeks whether we were gonna go for lead certification or not. It was a little extra cost. My concern was we would chase points. I wanted to do the right things. I didn't care if they scored a point or not. But what made me realize that we needed to do lead was we had Austin and all the other contractors who were, if I'd said, we want sustainability and green building, what is that? But with the lead, we could at least say, look, here's the point, but here's that we want to meet. Here's what that entails. Here's how you can help us meet that. And so it gave us a playbook to share with all the other, degree of difficulty, this many people, that at least defined it. And that's why we ended up making the decision. And Louis McMahon, who is our facilities vice president, he was a little skeptical at first. When I told him Rocky Mountain Institute, he said, Colorado, we're not going to go sit around and sing Kumbaya, are we? I said, no, these are pretty sharp people. They're pretty focused on the engineering side. We were halfway through, and he came into my office one day. He said, how are we looking? I said, lead gold should be in the bag, Louis. He says, what would it take to get platinum? You know, the competitive nature was sticking in. I said, you asking me that about 6 months ago is what it would take. We're a little too far along. So yeah, platinum is a little bit, again, my house doesn't have any certification. The passive house standard, it exceeds that. If the passive house standard had been around in 1996, I would have been able to certify. It didn't even exist. But if you look at how many KBTU per square foot per year, I meet every check mark of the passive house standard. I don't have the certificate or a plaque on the wall, but I have the results and I have the operational efficiency. That, when I give classes on stuff, I say, so the decision to certify is really based on, are you building these and trying to sell them to someone? And that certification is going to bring a level of confidence. If you're building it for yourself, do you even need to certify? I would take the best of all of those standards and figure out what, for the climate I'm in, for the location I'm in, what's the best I can do. If I didn't get a certification, that doesn't bother me. But if you're trying to market yourself or something, you're trying, Austin Commercial saying we have built this many certified buildings, right? It has some panache in it. So that's the thing about certifications. Yeah, Steve Pinson, I knew Steve from Austin. He was at TI for many years. I knew him at TI, and then he went to Austin. Other questions? If not, I'll let you guys wrap up your meeting and be done.
Thank you, Paul.
Thanks.
All right, anybody from online that may have a question? Forgot to ask that.
There wasn't anything in the chat, but if anybody has anything, feel free to jump in, go off mute.
Thank you, Abby. All right, so good stuff. All right, great stuff, right? One of the things that I wanted to touch on about Paul's presentation is, again, a lot of influence with us in the HSE team. Paul, and I guess I would call it a team back then, challenged everybody within the facilities organization for us to come up with ways of what are we doing now that we really don't need. And one of the biggest ones that I could think of is the amount of exit stairwells that we had in these facilities. Now everybody may say, well, Jose, having more is better. But we actually sat down and said, does this really make us safer? Do we have to do this? And so those were the hard questions. I've just used that one. There were a lot more discussions than just exit stairwells, but we ended up eliminating, I think it was a third of the exit stairwells. Also the way we designed chems and gases, where they were located as far as the chem and gas rooms. I mean, there was a lot of thought, but they just not did it, they did it the smart way. They pushed the whole organization, like you mentioned, to come up with these white papers. And nothing was sacred. There was no sacred cows out there. They were like, bring it on. We want to read about it, So I'm sure they spent hours and hours because they got flooded with ideas. But that's what you want, right? To get that momentum going, to be able to make that change. And, we're all extremely proud of what we submitted, regardless if it made it or not. It made you feel like, okay, they're hearing me. I'm important to this organization. So that's another key thing. The morale just skyrocketed after that because we're actually being listened to. So that was a big thing. So just wanted to touch on that a little bit, Paul. With that, just I promised you guys some announcements here. So a few things about ASSP and their strategic plan from 2023 to 2028. Our mission, I know most of you know this, but I still want to make sure we bring it up. We're the community that protects people, property, and the environment. Our mission reflects our role as the guardians of workplace safety. Our ultimate goal is to have all workers return home to their loved ones safe, healthy, and well each day. Our vision, safety, health, and well-being are inherent rights of every worker. Our vision is an ideal to which we aspire, recognizing that this work requires collaboration, with regulatory bodies, businesses, and non-governmental organizations, as well as our community of safety and health professionals. A few things on our values, right? This is what I always tell folks, that values are very difficult to change. This is kind of the stuff that we grew up with, right? Our clear values, first is community, right? Second is leadership. We have to lead the way in everything that has to do with safety of not just people, but the environment as well. Respect, everybody in this room and everybody in this organization deserves respect, but we also, in order for us to receive respect, we got to give it too, right? So that's reciprocal there. Accountability. We have to keep each other accountable. And this is part of what we do. We have people like Paul come and speak and say, hey, how can we do things better? Not just do the same old, right? Keep things ethical, reliable, those kind of things, and excellence. We're all about getting better, right? We may not be there, but hey, what do we need to do to get there, right? And even when we get there, is time for a new plan to even get better. We have our 2025 Dallas-Fort Worth Safety Summit. We have Fort Worth that we're partnering with an AIHA. And so it's not called the PDC, but it's called the 2025 Dallas-Fort Worth Safety Summit. It's going to be in the Hearst Conference Center, April 2nd. We invite everybody. Everything's on the website. On the PDC for Region 3, I believe that's going to be in Tulsa. We need people to speak, exhibitors, sponsors, and of course, attendees. So we really challenge you to take a look at that. If you have that ability to speak or you've spoken before, by all means, put your name in the hat. And the last thing is society elections. They open March 1st. Please, please, please get on there and vote. And our elections open April 1st for the Southwest region. This is the last call for anyone that wants to run for any position. We put the information out there. If you have any questions about that and you want to volunteer, trust me, it's very fulfilling. It's not easy. It's difficult, but again, very fulfilling. So any questions you may have, by all means, send me a text, email, whatever, and we'll make sure you get on that ballot. And that's all I have. Any questions from anybody here? Nope. All right. Thank you. Have a safe trip home.